My love affair with palm trees began when I was a child on family vacations in Florida. The sight of those swaying fronds instantly evoked sunshine and carefree days, even if we lived most of the year in a rather ordinary part of the Midwest. Years later, after I'd settled into the Maplewood Greens condominium complex, on the outskirts of a bustling American city, I craved a small reminder of those sunny memories. So, when I discovered a nursery selling cold-hardy palms, I jumped at the chance. Planted just to the side of my unit's entryway, my newly acquired palm gave my yard a tiny dash of the tropics. It might have seemed out of place among the typical suburban shrubs, but it made me smile each morning. Sure, it required some special winter preparation, wrapping the trunk and roots when the temperatures plummeted, but for the most part, it stood valiantly, adding a unique flair to the block. Most neighbors found it charming, even if it was an odd sight in a region better known for maples and oaks. Unfortunately, in a place governed by a homeowners association, any unusual aesthetic risked drawing the attention of the self-appointed rule enforcer. In Maplewood Greens, that meddling presence manifested in the form of Brenda Karen Arnett. Officially, she was in her mid-50s, carrying the title of Landscape and Security Oversight for the HOA. Unofficially, she was a busybody who believed every patch of grass, every shrub, every plant must conform to her personal vision of uniform perfection. Because my palm tree stood out, it was only a matter of time before she fixated on it. But Karen didn't limit herself to criticizing aesthetics. She also oversaw the complex's security camera installations, believing wholeheartedly that continuous surveillance was the key to a safe community. If she could find an excuse to meddle with a homeowner's property, particularly something that blocked her camera's lines of sight, she would. And so, in one misguided swoop, she forever changed the shape of my palm tree, spurring me to craft a solution that was both petty and pointed, an even taller observation deck overlooking the neighborhood. A final move that left her regretting she'd ever touched my tree in the first place. When I moved to Maplewood Greens, I accepted the usual HOA restrictions. Paint colors had to be from a certain palette, fences needed to be a uniform height, and so forth. These were typical suburban measures to protect property values. Meanwhile, Karen, in her capacity as a security liaison, had championed the addition of cameras at strategic points around the complex: the front gate, the clubhouse entrance, and a few corners near the trash compactor areas. In principle, no one minded the cameras if they truly deterred crime. But Karen insisted on pushing them beyond reason. She lobbied to mount cameras near private units, scanning sidewalks, driveways, and sometimes even backyards. She claimed, "We must ensure coverage of every angle, so if anyone suspicious loiters, we'll have a record." The board, made up mostly of indifferent or timid residents, rarely fought her. Over time, Maplewood Greens sprouted cameras like mushrooms after rain. Some neighbors disliked feeling watched, but Karen was relentless. "If you're doing nothing wrong," she'd say, "you have nothing to worry about." Despite her paternalistic approach, I never had a direct clash with Karen, until the day she decided my palm tree threatened her beloved cameras. The trouble started innocently enough. A new set of cameras was installed near the sidewalk leading to our building. Their vantage point included the shared walkway and a portion of the front yards. One camera faced an angle that just barely grazed the corner of my property, capturing passers-by. Weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, Karen knocked on my door with that stern expression, a manila folder clutched in her arms. "Good afternoon," she began in a tone that sounded anything but friendly. "We have a small problem with your tree. It's obstructing the camera's line of sight." I gave her a puzzled look. My palm soared about 10 feet tall, with big fronds crowning the top. It was near my front window, a good distance from the sidewalk camera. "I doubt it's actually blocking that camera," I said, stepping outside. "See, the angle's pretty open. Maybe a small portion of the street is behind it, but..." Karen cut me off. "I've checked the footage. The top portion of the palm occasionally sways into view, partially obscuring the vantage. This is a security risk. We can't allow such obstructions." She brandished the folder, presumably containing pictures. "You must trim the top, or we'll consider it a violation." Alarm flared in me. But that's how a palm is shaped. Those fronds make up the crown. You can't just chop off the top. It'll ruin the aesthetics and might actually harm the tree. She sniffed. "Better that than hamper security." The board can levy fines or forcibly trim it if you refuse. I tried to remain calm. Look, let me see the footage. If there's truly a big obstruction, maybe we can prune a few fronds, but I'm not cutting the entire top. That'll damage the palm's growth. Her face hardened. Suit yourself. But I expect compliance soon. With that, she marched away. That night, I peered at my palm, imagining how misguided it would be to hack off the crown. If the top were gone, the tree would look stunted, possibly die. I resolved to contact the board, see if we could find a compromise. However, I underestimated how quickly Karen would escalate her demands. Before I had a chance to plead my case to the broader board, something appalling occurred. One Saturday morning, I returned from grocery shopping to find a battered pile of palm fronds on my front lawn, the trunk of my beloved palm left nearly bare. The top had been crudely sawed off, leaving an ugly stub. My heart sank. Rushing over, I stared at the tree in horror. It was missing its lush green crown. Only a few ragged stumps of fronds remained. The yard was strewn with the severed leaves. The trunk oozed a sticky sap in some spots. I felt a mix of fury and heartbreak. Over a year's worth of careful growth was undone in one savage slash. A neighbor across the street, Janice, hurried over, eyes wide. I saw Karen here about an hour ago with a maintenance guy. She told him to chop your tree's top for safety compliance. I tried to protest, but they insisted it was an HOA directive. I'm so sorry. I clenched my fists. She didn't have the right to do that without giving me a final notice or hearing me out. Janice shook her head in sympathy. Anger boiled in me. Not only had Karen ignored my refusal, she'd taken unilateral action, effectively destroying the palm's signature form. I'll file a complaint, I muttered, glaring at the raw stump. The entire shape was ruined. The tree would likely survive, but look strange for months, if not years, until new fronds emerged from the apex. As I gathered the chopped fronds, Karen herself strode by, clipboard in hand, looking composed. We had to maintain camera visibility, she said, not an ounce of remorse in her voice. If you have objections, you can address them at the next HOA meeting. In the meantime, the job is done. You had no right to butcher my tree. I retorted, chest tight with fury. That's borderline vandalism. Her lips thinned. It's not vandalism if it's for community security. The bylaws permit the HOA to remove or trim plants interfering with official installations. If you're upset, I suggest you read the rules more carefully. I wanted to shout, but she turned and left, heels clicking. That night, I seethed over the lost beauty of my palm's crown, feeling powerless under her self-righteous stance. The HOA often sided with her, as she couched everything in security or budgetary terms. But I vowed to find a form of recourse, some way to push back and show her that her controlling nature wouldn't go unchecked. Over the following days, I weighed my options. I could file a formal complaint, even consult a lawyer about property damage. But I suspected the bylaws gave the HOA broad latitude for necessary trimming. The board might do little to punish Karen. My palm's top was gone. That harm was done. No fine or apology would fix the abrupt, flat stub. The best I could hope for was replanting or waiting months for the fronds to regrow. Meanwhile, every time I saw the cameras near the sidewalk, I fumed. Karen's obsession with an unobstructed view had destroyed my property's unique charm. She claimed it was a camera vantage issue. So if she wanted an unobstructed vantage, maybe I'd give her vantage, only on my own terms. That's when a mischievous plan formed. I'd build a tall observation deck in my yard, something that soared well above the palm's former height, ironically giving me a perfect vantage to observe her house. If she thought she had a right to see everything, let her experience how it felt to be watched from on high. Such a structure might seem petty or weird, but it wasn't inherently against the rules if it followed building codes. Maplewood Greens allowed certain yard structures, gazebos, sheds, provided they were within height and property line restrictions. An observation deck might fall into a gray area, but if I designed it carefully and cited it as an outdoor lounge, the HOA might have limited grounds to object. I pictured a raised platform, maybe 12 to 15 feet tall, with a small staircase or ladder. Enough to tower over the trimmed palm trunk, but not so monstrous as to violate any immediate bylaw. Yes, it was a bit theatrical, but Karen's brazen assault on my palm demanded a bold response. If I succeeded, I'd have a vantage that overshadowed her precious cameras, possibly making her paranoid. She'd regret pushing me around. That notion spurred me into action. Before I purchased lumber or drew up designs, I carefully reread Maplewood Green's official guidelines. They covered standard issues, fence heights, how far a shed could be from the property boundary, restrictions on major structural additions. However, I spotted a small clause. Residents were permitted to erect decorative or functional yard structures up to a certain height, typically 12 feet, without requiring full board approval. For anything taller, a request was needed. Now, 12 feet was fairly tall, though not excessively so. My palm had been about 10 feet. If I built the deck's floor at 8 or 9 feet and added a short railing, the top might approach 11 or 12 feet. That should stay within the limit. Could I go even higher with some creative interpretation? Possibly, but I didn't want to risk an outright violation. If I stuck to 12 feet total, the board had minimal recourse. I also needed to ensure it didn't intrude on a neighbor's line of sight or overshadow their property. My yard was on a corner, so the nearest neighbor's structure was several yards away. I found no direct mention of no observation decks. So, in principle, if I labeled it as a garden deck or raised patio, I might be in the clear. The only potential trouble was if Karen contested it as an eyesore or claimed it was a security risk. But ironically, the cameras and her own logic about vantage points might undermine her argument. Confident enough, I decided to proceed. Next step was to gather materials. Pressure-treated lumber for the frame, sturdy posts, a few planks for the platform, some decorative touches to pass it off as a pleasant yard feature. I'd keep the design simple but stable, about 8 feet off the ground with an open-air platform. Over time, I might add a small canopy for shade. I smiled at the thought of standing up there, looking out across the neighborhood, overshadowing the cameras that had destroyed my tree's top. Petty or not, it felt justified. I'm no professional carpenter, but I had enough DIY experience to tackle this. On a Saturday morning, a friend named Brian, handy with tools, joined me. We sank 4 sturdy 4x4 posts into deep concrete footings in a roughly 8 by 8 foot square. The plan was to attach crossbeams, then lay decking boards. By mid-afternoon, sweat dripping in the sun, we'd erected a skeletal frame about 8 feet high. Another couple hours saw the decking boards hammered into place, plus a simple railing around the perimeter. We ended up with a surprisingly robust raised platform. I checked the top with a measuring tape, just under 12 feet from ground level to the railing peak, safely within the HOA's limit. Curious neighbors stopped by, some joking, "What are you building, a watchtower?" I grinned. Just a neat raised deck, a place to lounge. A few winked, suspecting the real motive. Word spread quickly that I was responding to the palm tree fiasco with an in-your-face structure. People chuckled, anticipating Karen's reaction. Sure enough, late in the afternoon, as we were cleaning up sawdust, Karen appeared across the street. She froze, eyes widening at the sight of my newly erected deck. I waved casually. She scowled, marched off without a word. I smirked, guessing she'd soon try to condemn my deck. But I'd done my homework. The structure was within the allowed height, properly within my yard's boundary. Let her squeal, I thought. This time, I was in compliance. The next day, I climbed the deck's short ladder with a folding chair and a small table, setting them up on the platform. The vantage was quite something. 8 feet above ground gave me a partial view of neighboring roofs, the street, and yes, even the area around Karen's condo. Granted, it wasn't a sweeping panorama, but I could see more than I could at ground level. I took a seat with a cold drink, feeling a twinge of satisfaction imagining how Karen might hate the idea of me spying. Not that I truly intended to watch her house, but the possibility alone was enough to rattle her. As I gazed over the community, I also glimpsed the spot where my palm once proudly stood. Now it was a stubby trunk with truncated fronds, a sad reminder of Karen's intrusion. The deck overshadowed it, ironically highlighting how a replacement palm or new top growth would take time. But seeing the broad horizon from this vantage ironically soothed my bitterness. I had turned adversity into a defiant symbol of independence. Then I caught sight of a glint. One of Karen's cameras perched near the sidewalk, presumably scanning the area around my yard. The lens aimed somewhere below, but from up on my deck, I was outside its field of view. Freed from that watchful eye, it was almost comedic. She'd cut my tree to enhance the camera vantage, and I ended up building a vantage that overcame the camera's position entirely. The irony tasted sweet. It didn't take long for Karen to mount a backlash. Within days, I received an official-looking envelope from the HOA, stamped with urgent red letters. Notice of potential violation. Inside was a letter signed by Karen. Dear resident, our records indicate you have constructed a tall platform/observation deck on your property. This installation may conflict with aesthetic guidelines and raises safety concerns. Please provide documentation showing compliance with all building codes and HOA height restrictions. Failure to do so may result in enforcement action. Regards, Brenda Karen Arnett. Landscape and Security Oversight, Maplewood Greens. I rolled my eyes. She was fishing for any excuse to tear it down. But I had my documentation ready. Photos, measurements, receipts for materials, plus a copy of the relevant bylaw allowing structures up to 12 feet tall. My deck was 11 feet, 10 inches at the highest point, well within the limit. So I responded with a polite letter, attaching all the evidence. Ms. Arnett, thank you for your inquiry. Enclosed you'll find photos and measurements confirming my deck's total height is under 12 feet, in full compliance with Maplewood Greens guidelines. Additionally, I hired a local inspector to ensure structural soundness. See attached note. Please confirm there is no violation. Sincerely, my name. A few days later, an HOA email arrived from the official board mailbox, not from Karen's personal account, stating, Subject, Observation Deck. My name. Thank you for providing the requested documents. After review, the board finds that your deck does not exceed the 12-foot guideline and poses no immediate safety hazard. Therefore, no violation has been recorded. We appreciate your cooperation. Maplewood Greens, HOA Board. I grinned. Karen must have fumed over that outcome. The board upheld the rules, leaving my structure unscathed. She had no immediate path to force removal. The deck stood triumphant, mocking her earlier sabotage of my palm. As summer rolled on, neighbors began noticing a change in Karen's demeanor. Instead of strutting around with her usual confidence, she glanced upward frequently, as if worried someone might be perched on my deck observing her. She'd pass my yard, shoot a glare, and hustle by. At times, I'd lounge on the deck reading a magazine or sipping lemonade, not even caring about her. But the very possibility that I could watch her house from that vantage had her uneasy. Some neighbors teased that I'd become the new eyes in the sky. A few joked that Karen had created her own monster. I feigned innocence. Oh, it's just a nice place to catch breezes, I'd say. But word got back that Karen complained to the board about privacy concerns. The board apparently told her that if my deck followed the rules, she had to accept it. After all, she never hesitated to defend the cameras she installed, saying, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't worry. Now the shoe was on the other foot. I suppose she disliked being on the receiving end of watchfulness. A subtle shift in community sentiment also occurred. People who'd previously feared Karen's authority saw that she could be outmaneuvered if you stuck to the bylaws. My deck symbolized a pushback against her meddling. Some neighbors quietly thanked me for standing up to her. A few murmured that they might do something similar if she messed with their property. She, in turn, retreated somewhat from her iron-fisted approach, though she still patrolled with that sour expression. Despite the short-term satisfaction, I couldn't ignore the state of my palm tree. Its top was severed, leaving an awkward shape. Palms regrow from the crown, but the damage done by Karen's slash might cause stunted new fronds or possibly kill it if the trunk was cut too deeply. I tried applying a special sealant to protect the cut. Over the next few weeks, small shoots began poking from the top, a sign of partial recovery. But it would take many months for it to regain a normal silhouette, if ever. Each time I looked at the battered trunk, a pang of anger resurfaced, reminding me of Karen's arrogance. I considered replanting a new palm, but felt reluctant to give up on the old one. Maybe it would surprise me and bounce back. Meanwhile, my deck overshadowed that battered trunk, a constant reminder that I'd at least responded in a constructive, albeit cheeky, way. I also mulled the possibility of taking legal action for property damage, but the HOA bylaws likely shielded her from major liability if she claimed security necessity. And even if I sued, the money wouldn't restore my tree's lost top. So I let it go, focusing on the small triumph I had with the deck. As summer ended, Maplewood Greens prepared for its annual Community Day, a weekend event with barbecues, vendor booths, and an HOA meeting open to all. I typically skip these gatherings, but this time, I sensed Karen would attempt one last jab at me. Sure enough, the day before Community Day, I received an official notice, agenda item, review of elevated structures. It was presumably about my deck. Possibly, she planned to muster support to forcibly limit structure heights or impose new rules. On the day of the meeting, a crowd gathered in the clubhouse auditorium. The board sat at a table in front, with Karen at the far left, arms folded. After routine updates, they reached the item in question. Karen cleared her throat. We must discuss the matter of excessively tall yard structures, specifically an observation deck erected by a resident. Her eyes flicked toward me. While it may be currently within the 12-foot limit, it poses potential intrusion on neighbors' privacy. The board should consider amending guidelines to forbid such constructions close to property lines or overshadowing adjacent homes. I sighed, raising my hand. I'd like to respond. First, my deck is not overshadowing any immediate neighbor. There's ample distance. Second, the 12-foot limit is explicitly stated, and I adhered to it. Third, if privacy is a concern, why does the HOA allow cameras that watch over private yards? That cuts both ways. Applause rippled through the audience. Karen glared. Cameras are for communal security, not personal surveillance. A raised deck can be used to spy on unsuspecting neighbors. She tried to muster moral outrage. We must protect the community from such intrusions. A neighbor, Ms. Tan, stood. Isn't that hypocritical? Our complex is covered in cameras, many at your insistence, Ms. Arnett. If we're comfortable with that level of monitoring, why the fuss about a single deck? At least we know who's using it. Unlike an unseen camera feed. A wave of agreement spread. Another neighbor said, Karen's the one who destroyed my name. Palm tree for an alleged camera vantage. Now she complains about vantage issues? Seems she can dish it out, but not take it. Karen tried to retort, but the momentum was against her. The board members exchanged glances, evidently wary of fueling further conflict. Stewart, the HOA president, quietly declared, we have no current rule requiring residents to keep yard structures below 12 feet or banning raised decks. Without a compelling reason to suspect an actual privacy violation, we can't retroactively forbid them. Unless the majority wants to adopt a new bylaw, we have no basis to proceed. Let's see if there's support for that. He called for a show of hands among the audience regarding whether they wanted a new bylaw restricting deck heights further. Only a smattering of hands rose, mostly a few of Karen's allies. A clear majority opposed it or remained indifferent. The measure flopped. Karen's face tightened with anger. Thus, the final attempt to strike down my deck collapsed. I, for one, exhaled relief. The meeting moved on to other business. Karen was left simmering in defeat, again reminded that she couldn't always get her way. The satisfaction I felt was palpable. In the aftermath, Maplewood Greens returned to a semblance of normalcy. The deck stood, unchallenged, in my yard. While I occasionally relaxed up there with friends, it wasn't the constant spy tower Karen painted it to be. In truth, it was just a cozy vantage to enjoy sunsets, greet neighbors, or read a book. The fact that it unnerved Karen was a bonus. Meanwhile, my poor palm struggled valiantly. Each week, I checked the trunk for rot, anxiously waiting for new fronds to grow. Slowly, a tuft of green emerged at the apex. By late fall, a few baby fronds poked out, forming a tiny crown. It looked a bit silly, like a large trunk wearing a sprout hat, but at least it showed signs of survival. If the winter wasn't too harsh, the palm might regain more fronds by next summer. That glimmer of hope warmed my heart. With patience, the palm might eventually stand proud again. Karen, for her part, toned down her aggression. She still oversaw security cameras, but the fiasco with my deck had taught her that if she pushed too hard, residents would fight back. The board, newly emboldened by the community's reaction, refused to let her single-handedly enforce such draconian measures. She remained a presence at meetings, but her aura of unstoppable authority was gone. A few neighbors teased me about building even bigger expansions, like a second-story extension to the deck or a small tower. I laughed. I'm content with what I have. Don't need to escalate further. My point was made. I'd turned her vicious trim job into a reason to build something bigger. And in the end, It felt like the fiasco spurred a community lesson. No one occupant, not even a bossy HOA official, could unilaterally impose their will without pushback. Just when I thought the drama had settled, a small twist occurred. One bright weekend, I lounged on my deck, sipping iced tea, enjoying the breeze. Suddenly, a faint pounding noise caught my attention, coming from the direction of Karen's condo. Leaning over the railing, I spotted a ladder propped against her house. A workman hammered something near the eaves, installing a new camera or adjusting an existing one, presumably. But interestingly, the angle was such that it pointed directly at the sidewalk below my deck. Was Karen doubling down on her camera coverage to watch my yard from a new vantage? Possibly. However, from my raised platform, I could see the top of that camera, too. If she was indeed aiming it upward, I'd remain partially outside its line of sight. The scenario amused me. We were in a comedic standoff, each with vantage points. But that only highlighted the futility of her attempts to control everything. My deck overshadowed her moves. The final comedic piece. A few days later, I discovered she'd actually changed the camera angle, apparently out of frustration that she couldn't see the platform as well as she wanted. I glimpsed her speaking angrily with the same installer. But the deck was simply too tall, and the position of her house too offset, to get a clear shot. The irony was delicious. She'd removed my tree's top to open a camera view, and I'd built something far more obstructive and fully legal. That coda epitomized the entire conflict. With the seasons turning, Maplewood Greens settled into a calmer rhythm. The cameras remained, but nobody minded so long as they stuck to communal areas. My deck soared behind my condo, a monument to personal freedom. Some neighbors joked it was the best vantage to see the Independence Day fireworks in the distance. Indeed, on the 4th of July, a group of us gathered atop it, clinking glasses and admiring the bursts of color overhead. We toasted to defiance, to the battered palms' slow regrowth, and to the idea that no tyrannical busybody could trample our rights if we stood firm. Karen's role in the HOA continued, albeit with less power. She tried to push new security upgrades, but the board demanded open discussions and balanced viewpoints. A small but meaningful shift. On the surface, we maintained polite greetings. She never apologized for hacking my palm tree. I suspect she believed she was in the right. But the entire fiasco left her with a sense of caution. She realized that meddling with residents' private property could provoke strong backlash. Maybe she learned a shred of humility. As for me, whenever I ascended my deck's short ladder, I felt a stirring of pride. My palm might take years to regain its full majesty, but in the meantime, my vantage soared even higher, an unspoken reminder that if someone tries to block me, I can rise above it. My yard became a small tourist spot of sorts, with neighbors occasionally asking if they could come up to see the view or just chat. The deck fostered a sense of community, ironically missing from the suspicious camera environment Karen had cultivated. And so it ends. My short but dramatic journey from a happy palm tree owner to a reluctant rebel, forced to defend my property's uniqueness against an overzealous HOA official. Karen's brash action, trimming the top of my beloved palm, sparked an even bolder response. A towering observation deck that overshadowed her very reason for chopping the tree. In the final analysis, I derived from this fiasco a renewed sense of autonomy and a small victory over the intrusive power plays that threaten individual freedoms in suburban America. The palm's new fronds are slowly unfurling. Each tender leaf feels like a testament to resilience. My deck stands tall, meeting no further challenges. Karen, for her part, is left to cope with the knowledge that her sabotage backfired spectacularly, increasing the vantage into her own domain. The rest of Maplewood Greens carries on with modest normalcy, a bit more mindful that one determined resident can hold off an overreaching official. If that's not a happy ending, where humor, defiance, and a bit of tropical flair triumph over tyranny, I don't know what is.